I'd like to welcome our two presenters. We have Barry Heavey, Managing Director with Accenture. Barry focuses on the digitization of manufacturing, quality, and supply chain in biopharma, and will be presenting challenges with today's increasingly decentralized and complex supply chain and how sponsors and CDMOs plan to address them. We also have Mark Isaacs, VP of Sales with Skyland Analytics. Mark will review requirements in selecting a software system to address these challenges and provide a brief demo of Skyland PIMS data collaboration platform. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass this over to Barry.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here and talk to you today about what our Accenture's position and point of view in this area. I guess first of all, just wanted to flag that we have this year published a point of view that we refer to as New Science, and really what we're doing there is outlining some of the challenges and opportunities that we see in the life science sector over the next 5 years, and in particular how they impact on manufacturing. And essentially the challenges that we point out is an industry that's facing what we refer to as compressive disruption. It's not the kind of big bang disruption that you often hear about retailers getting disrupted by Amazon, but it's more a potential long, slow decline that the industry is facing into. But with that kind of challenge ahead, there's also a silver lining. There's a number of companies who are booking that trend, and fundamentally there's a growth engine that's emerging, which we call New Science. Next slide, just talk a little bit about one example of the challenges that the industry face in this compressive disruption space. And this is, there are a number of ones we point out in the report, but this is a pretty stark one. It's just this idea of the tenure with which a specific product can dominate a therapeutic area. And this has dropped very significantly in the last 20 years. Everyone will remember the Lipitor or atorvastatin was a dominant product in the cardiovascular space for a very long time, but obviously dropped off precipitously when the patent expired. But what we're seeing now is many new therapies coming in therapeutic areas don't have that long tenure. And again, staying in the cardiovascular space, if you think of the new therapies in the space for PCSK9, there's been two products come out at the same around similar times in that space, Repatha and Praluent, and now there's a new therapy coming that's a new modality for the same pathway using RNAi, where there's been a lot of excitement recently with the acquisition by Novartis in that space. So yeah, we see this challenge ahead for the industry, but equally this challenge is actually also underpinned by what the growth opportunity is, which is the fact that new therapies are coming to market much quicker because of what we refer to as New Science. So this is the next slide. This is really just talking about this is the antidote to the compressive disruption. It's where companies are investing in new mechanisms, modalities, or more precise indications, and then combining that with health technology. Very often a companion technology could be a device, it could be an app, and in some cases even can be technology alone. So this is really where we see the upside for the industry, and actually as we see the industry, we still predict the industry is going to grow in the coming years, and some companies are just going to do better than others. But fundamentally, a lot of the growth in the industry over the next few years, 54% will be driven by new science and those kind of new therapeutic modalities and those combination products that are coming through the pipeline at the moment. So what does this all mean? Effectively, this means more complexity, right? So companies are moving away from just having to look after the molecule, really having to look after a real combination of technologies, the molecule, the technology, or the device, and maybe new talent capabilities, for example, for new therapeutic modalities that they didn't have in their organizations before. And it also means that there's going to be a rise in smaller companies taking up a bigger market share in the industry. So small biotech companies and new tech companies, med tech companies who are going to play in the space. And the dominance of big pharma is still going to be there, but it's going to be a bit lessened. But again, the challenge and the opportunity will be in that collaboration between companies. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit about how what all this means there's lots of exciting and new complex therapeutics and combination products coming through, but this drives a major shift, and is already driving a major shift in the complexity in supply chain operations. So linking the science with the supply chain, how are brand owners and CDMOs addressing this complexity? So we also did another report this year called Dare to be Different, where we surveyed a number of senior executives from over 105 companies to get their sense of how they're planning to address the supply chain challenges in the industry. And again, briefly talking about the results on the next slide. So yeah, I mean, it's looking like a very exciting time in the contract external manufacturing space. 91% of manufacturers will be expanding their use of CMOs and CDMOs in the coming years to help them cope with this increased complexity, their increased interest in companion devices, companion diagnostics, novel therapeutic modalities where they don't have expertise in manufacturing the product or the type of product that is coming through the pipeline. And equally, 78% of CMOs are going to increase capacity in the coming years. So while there's been challenges and a lot of back and forth and talk about reshoring and so on in the CMO industry, you know, I think the outlook for the industry looks very exciting. But it also brings a lot of complexity. So 1 in 5 of the large pharma companies now are working with over 100 external partners, and this seems likely to grow. And the big pain point for the companies is the issue of lacking visibility across their external network, ability to control and standardize. And in the context of a more complex portfolio, this is a real challenge. So not to go into a huge amount of detail, but these are some of the key points that came out of our survey. Clients are concerned about the lack of standardization across this very large number of CMOs and the cost and complexity that this brings with it in terms of managing their supply chain, their SKUs, their regulatory compliance. The inability to properly plan and execute across an S&OP kind of value chain is making this very difficult and leading to very long lead times and a lot of inventory carry both at WIP and at finished product space. And this inability to track real-time what's happening in manufacturing or quality across the supply chain internally but especially externally. Very long delays in tech transfers and onboarding of suppliers, which again now with the speed at which these new drugs from new science are being approved, very often manufacturing is now increasingly starting to look like it's on the critical path for these products. The time frame to optimize and get a steady state in manufacturing is often longer than it's taking to get the drugs through critical clinical trials. And then all of the risk that this brings in terms of risk to quality or compliance and issues around managing data integrity and latency of information exchange. So some serious opportunities in the industry in the interaction between CMOs and their sponsors, and this we see this branching across, especially API, where a number of where the majority of the pharma companies plan to expand their investment in external manufacturing, and by API I mean across all therapeutic modalities, whether it's small molecule, biologics, cell therapy, or viral vector, or other types of DNA or RNA-based therapies. Also a big focus on investing in packaging and formulation and next generation approaches to delivery of drugs. So lots of challenges, but I think kind of consensus in the industry that the industry, both the brand owners and CDMOs, expect digital technology to help with some of the challenges that they face in this collaboration. And so there's a laundry list here of buzzwords in the digital space that companies are interested in, from big data to control towers and augmented reality and so on. Just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that cloud collaboration platforms come up quite actually at the top of the list in terms of the only one on the list where 100% of the surveyed participants felt they're already using these kind of tools to improve collaboration, or they plan to implement in the next 3 years. So both brand owners and CMOs are are completely bought into this idea, and so I think we believe this is quite relevant and obviously quite interesting in terms of what Skyland Analytics are doing. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark to take you through the presentation from Skyland.
Thanks, Barry. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll spend a couple of minutes just telling you a little bit about who Skyland is as a technology provider to help meet some of the pressures that Barry mentioned Accenture has identified in the industry. We've been around as a company for 4 years, but our core team has been doing this for many years, well over 15. Some of you may be already familiar with the Discoverance software that we actually developed and implemented throughout many of the global biopharma companies. And with that experience has come an in-depth expertise with connecting to various electronic data sources such as ERPs, LIMS, EBRs, and so on. We're actually partnering with Accenture to scale this capability. But our next generation software, Skyland PIMS, it's a process information management suite, really focuses on delivering data access, data aggregation, and data analysis in a cloud-based platform, which lends itself very nicely to collaboration between sponsors and CMOs, really helping to smooth out fragmentation across the supply chain and really meet some of those drivers and realize some of those opportunities that Barry mentioned in his last couple of slides. So just to explain a little bit more about what PIMS, Process Information Management Suite, is, a lot of our customers see this as a single source of truth throughout the product life cycle and also across the supply chain. So allowing both sponsors and CDMOs to make use of a common data repository, allowing a portal for secure selective data transparency and accumulating knowledge as that process develops, so helping to redefine tech transfer and then making this data available for analysis in a single end-to-end validatable system. So no matter where your landscape of manufacturing is, whether it's internal or whether it's via CMOs, and no matter what the level of automation is, you have a way of moving towards a digital platform to make that data more reusable. The PIMS software itself consists of 3 modules. I'll save the detailed description of capabilities for the actual software demonstration, but at the high level, then we have something called PIMS Batch, managing batch data, marrying that batch data up to limits in the form of product and process specifications, and then those 2 feeding a module called PIMS Analytics, which gives you everything you need for things like process monitoring and continued process verification. All of this is being licensed across a product family, which could span a complete supply chain. So whether you're looking at drug substance, drug product, either in your own organization or out at CMOs, this gives you one single centralized repository to be able to manage all of that data. And it also takes into account the fact that if you're working with CMOs, then much of that may be available in paper or spreadsheets today. So if you're receiving electronic batch records or PDFs of paper batch records, or if you have electronic batch records, then this gives you a way of having an initial on-ramp towards a digital future state, no matter where your starting point is. So where you have the data electronically, we would take that from the source systems, aggregate that data with any manually entered data or any spreadsheets coming from CMOs, contextualize that data in the PIMS aggregation layer, and then make that available to both the PIMS analytics module focused on regulatory reporting and third-party analytics reporting tools, depending on the actual use case and the stakeholder involved. So let's now drop down into the software itself and take a look at some of those use cases. This is a view of the home screen. There is no software installed on my machine as I'm demonstrating this. This is completely cloud-based. And the home screen provides a role-based management by exception approach to looking at particular charts that you may have subscribed to, which are relevant, and you may be able to sign up to particular alerts. So to be able to look at how things are trending, if things are moving out of trend, then you'd be able to sign up for a specific alert, and then combining that with content. So this could be various announcements, it could be following news from your portfolio, some of your favorite CMOs, and to be able to combine that in one home page to be able to deliver that most relevant content as and when you need it. The three modules that I described earlier, limits, batches, and analytics, have their own tabs here. All of these make use of a common process definition. So this is, you can think of this as a roadmap to the data. It's kind of the data spine. Right now, I'm looking at one product, a hypothetical product called AMAP, which is made at the Cambridge site. Now, as a sponsor, you may have a portfolio of products, which could be made both internally or could be made across a portfolio of CMOs. And the Skyland PIMS system is role-based, so it's been purpose-built to allow selective access to multiple users across the supply chain. So if you wanted to give access to one of your CMOs, you could do that, and they would only see that part of the supply chain that they are responsible for. And in that way, you can allow different users, different roles, and different levels of access across a very fragmented supply chain, but you as the sponsor would be able to control that as the licensee of the software. This process definition that I'm showing here, I mentioned it's relevant to this particular product, AMAP, and this has been developed as a roadmap to the data. It's been configured just using standard point and click configuration. So there is no programming, there is no customization here, there's no need to rely on a large IT department. This is completely configurable. Here we've got probably about 12 or so unit operations, about 100 parameters. And this would have been configured, just to give you an idea, in no more than a couple of hours for somebody that would have had access to the actual data. If I want to see the data itself and look at how easy it is to configure an individual parameter, we'd give it a name, description. Here we'd say where that parameter is expected to retrieve its data from. It could be focused on manual data entry. It could be derived from calculations associated with other data parameters that are in the process definition. Or if it's available in an electronic system, it could be queried. So anything with a SQL query, for example, an electronic batch record, we can query LIMS, historians for continuous data, or it could be a mix. So think of the process definition as a way of aggregating data. It's one single data hub collecting together different sources of the data and then allowing you to standardize with drop-down units of measure, different parameter classes, and the ability to add notes, attachments, and URLs as you evolve your process and accumulate process knowledge. And here you're also able, perhaps for the most critical parameters, to be able to look at verification settings so that when it's time to enter data, in this case manually, within the batch module, then I would be able to say that I'm expecting 1 decimal place and between a certain minimum and maximum. So in this way, I've configured my process definition. I'm then using this and leveraging this throughout the 3 modules for change management on specifications, both product and process specifications or target control limits, marrying that data up against batch data. So if I briefly look at the batches module, 3 ways of getting data in here. First of all, there could be manual data entry. So for example, this is a description of the number of batches being manufactured between a couple of different dates. One of these batches has largely relied on manual data entry and has been put through an approval process. So some of these data parameters have been approved, some of them have been rejected, and there's been one value that fell outside of that range I mentioned before, so it has a warning against it. As an approver, I haven't entered this data myself, so I am able to be authorized as an approver. I could reject. If I do reject, I put a reason in, and the system will capture that. So there's a full-blown audit trail for every single change in the database that can be filtered. So the system is fully supportive of GMP, fully Part 11 compliant. And then as I go through the approval process for the individual batch data, I would be able to keep track of multiple batches across multiple products. I mentioned data entry as one way of getting data into the system for perhaps a subset of a batch record that you've received from your CMO. If you are getting Excel spreadsheets from your CMO, then you can import batch data. The system will tell you what kind of an Excel template to expect. Or as I mentioned, the third way would be to go directly to the electronic data source if your CMO has a high enough level of automation and has invested in those electronic data sources. So 3 different ways of getting the data into the system. If I now move on and look at the analytics, then we can start looking at control charts, which are automatically marrying up the batch data shown here, applying run rules. So one data point here has been in violation of Rule 3, part of the Nelson rule set. The run rules themselves can be configured and saved to your own standards. You could start with either Nelson or Waco or configure your own from there. You have full configuration on what you can plot on these, and you have drill down capability. So for example, it looks like there's an outlier here, which has been flagged as such. There is an audit trail with notes, and there's the ability to drill down if you wanted to look at the individual batch record, which is appended here as an attached file. You could do that. So automatic calculations allow you to step through the various parameters. Here there's an example of a process shift where I can drill down and look at target control limits, a new control strategy that's been appointed. I can look at process capability with automatic calculation of PPKs and CPKs. I can look at normalization plots. And one of our latest features in the almost to be released 3.2 version, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks for commercial release, is the ability to monitor progress within a single batch. This one is looking at a multiple parameters within a single batch and how that's progressing and how they could be related. Or I could be looking at one critical parameter across several batches and starting to look at the concept of a golden batch to be able to see how far out of trend or in trend I am, and then be able to start signing up and subscribing for some of these analytics so that within the home page, then I can only monitor those particular graphs that I've subscribed for. I can move towards management by exception. I can look at various KPIs or various content across my CMO network. So in the time available, that gives you a high-level view of the PIMS software. Multiple companies have been using this software. We have some publishable use cases for some of these companies that are shown here. The use cases can be made available on request. But I think with that, let me hand it back to Christina, who can talk about any questions that may have come in.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, and if you missed the very beginning of the webinar, I did mention that you have the ability to type questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have questions, go ahead and do that, and we can get them answered for you. And let me just see if we currently have, yep, we have one here. It says, as the sponsor, Can my CDMO enter data into PIMS on my behalf?
Okay. So the answer to that question is yes. The system is cloud-based. So everything I presented in the software demo came from a single URL. And within that URL is the licensee of the software. You can control who else can log into the software and what their role would be when they log into the software. So we have some of our users at pretty advanced levels of collaboration with their CMOs. So if you're partnering with a long-term quality agreement with a CMO and you want to be able to start involving them, perhaps not just in the data entry process, but also sharing some of the analysis, you can do that very easily using the PIMS software and the role-based nature of the platform. It also brings up another point where there's a lot of value in having this data set be portable. So if you're, as a sponsor, if you're onboarding a new CMO, then you already have an accumulated data set, perhaps. If you're moving from one CMO to another CMO, that tech transfer can take place much more effectively. Or if you're building a new manufacturing facility and you want dual supply and you want to be able to compare the product at the CMO site with the internal or captive manufacturing site. So all of that's made possible. You do not have to provide access, of course, to your CMO. There is value within the PIMS platform in just structuring, organizing, and managing the data more effectively as it comes in today. So we do have PIMS customers that start off with no change management across their CMO network, but they just take the data or the documents in the form that they currently have coming in. Typically it could be an email of a PDF of a batch record, or it could be an Excel spreadsheet, and they use the PIMS software to manage that more effectively. And then maybe over time, develop a bit of a case study and then go back to the CMO to show them how easy it is to enter the data on their behalf. So for example, we do have CMOs that license the software themselves. Patheon, as part of Thermo Fisher, is a good example of that, where they see data visibility, data transparency to their customer base as a very high business driver, and they use the PIMS software to open the manufacturing data up to their customer base. So we have a variety of use cases around that question, Chris.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions. One on connectivity. Is it possible to have direct connectivity with a CMO's LIMS system, for example?
It is, yes, very much so. I mean, in the same way that we can connect to a sponsor's LIMS system, then we've designed this software to be flexible enough and connecting to the source tables in that LIMS system via SQL queries. Anybody that wants to get a more technical, detailed understanding of that, we'd be happy to answer that question together with some of our technical specialists to be able to look at particular use cases. But as I said in the summary of the Skyland part of the presentation, we have over 15 years worth of experience in connecting to a variety of different LIMS systems, all of the standard LIMS systems that are available on the marketplace, and regardless of whether that's in the sponsor's organization or in the CMO's organization, we are able to do that and then aggregate that with other forms of data from other electronic data sources as needed.
Great. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Is PIMS able to ingest data from scanned paper forms received from CMO?
Okay, so let's focus on the word ingest. In today's environment, the FDA and the quality departments of the companies that we're working with do not accept optical recognition technology to be able to extract data from paper batch records. So what we have focused on is the ability to, rather than transcribe a subset of that paper batch record into Excel, then provide the easy ability to transcribe into the PIMS batch module and then use approvals to be able to verify that data, and then to be able to move that through into a validatable system. The ability to use a validation kit, which we didn't really have time to get into today, but there is an optional validation kit that can take that process right the way through. But in today's environment, we have looked at the OCR type of technology, and that is not approved by quality departments that we're working with. So if the meaning of the word ingest was to extract via OCR, then we don't see that as a viable route today, but we have other ways of looking at getting that data in and then verifying that data.